Welcome to the top 25 bizarre things the ancient Egyptians did. This video will explore some of the most unusual and fascinating practices of this ancient civilization. From mummifying their dead to worshipping cats, the ancient Egyptians did some things that we might find strange today. But by understanding their culture and beliefs, we can gain a deeper appreciation for their unique way of life. Number 1. Using a bull hose, ashes, pumice, and burned eggshells for mouth hygiene. The ancient Egyptians used pumice to grind bull hooves, ash, and eggshells into a powder for oral hygiene. This method was effective but caused gum bleeding. They also used pepper, iris flowers, and rock salt for teeth cleaning. They were the first to invent toothbrushes and mint candles, using branches as toothpicks and toothbrushes. Number 2. Training baboons to catch criminals. The ancient Egyptians held baboons in high regard as animal police officers, keeping them on leashes and releasing them on criminals when needed. These animals were trained to collect fruits, brew beer, and dance, and were revered in Egyptian culture with tattoos featuring their images found on mummies. Number 3. Making crocodile sacrifices and mummifying them. While in Egypt, investigators discovered mummified human remains. They also found crocodile remains, but not usually in the same manner as human remains. For instance, in 2019, a tomb at the Kaaba del Hawa necropolis on the west bank of the Nile River was excavated. Without the use of resin, which is crucial in the mummification process, 10 reptiles were discovered mummified. However, researchers frequently came across well-preserved crocs that had been mummified. These animals are said to have been used as religious sacrifices by prehistoric humans, as well as nourishment for certain deities or those who had previously lived in the afterlife. In particular, crocodiles were associated with Sobek, the god of water and the flooding of the Nile. Number 4. Using stale bread as medicine. Although the ancient Egyptians were highly ingenious and intelligent, as was already established, their practice of treating wounds with moldy bread may seem a little odd. It was nonetheless successful and served as a predecessor to penicillin and other commonly used antibiotics. The reason this treatment worked was that the mold on bread was often a fungus which produces certain chemical compounds that either kill or restrict the growth of germs near cuts, scratches, and other open wounds. Number 5. The female pharaoh wore a fake beard. Hatshepsut was an Egyptian female pharaoh during the 18th dynasty. The only problem was that she was a woman, and female pharaohs, of whom there were only 3, were not as respected as their male counterparts. Although ancient Egypt was known for its gender equality, this did not extend to their rulers. In any case, Hatshepsut decided to take matters into her own hands and began wearing a long beard in the ancient Egyptian style to appear more masculine. Some artistic depictions of her often feature the fake beard. Number 6. They tied pouches with mouse bones around the necks of infants and young children. It seems that people believed that rodent bones were capable of curing children of illnesses. For example, it is said that to cure a sick infant, their mother could eat a mouse, and then the bones of that mouse would be placed into a small cotton pouch tied with 7 knots and hung around the child's neck as a talisman. There's also speculation that people from the lower classes use a similar method to cure children who had problems with bedwetting. Number 7. Removing eyebrow hair after a cat dies. You undoubtedly suspected that this video would feature another discussion on cats. These creatures were cherished dearly by the Egyptians. They treated cats with special reverence since they thought owning a cat brought good luck to the owner. They also had a strong bond with their cats, and when one passed away, the entire family shaved their eyebrows to express their sorrow. They grieved until their eyebrows came back. Number 8. Bathing in sour milk. Ancient Egyptians, including Cleopatra, bathed in sour milk, usually donkey milk, to improve their skin's appearance and condition. Today we know that sour milk contains lactic acid, which is a natural alpha-hydroxy acid. Such acids exfoliate the surface of the skin so that new, more evenly pigmented skin cells can form and take their place. It is said that 7,000 donkeys were required for Cleopatra's daily baths to provide enough milk. At least she didn't let it go to waste. Number 9. They used canopic jars to store vital organs. Canopic jars were used to preserve the internal organs of a deceased person during mummification and burial. Each jar held a separate organ, with the heart representing the soul's seed. Initially simple, they evolved into ornate representations of the 4 gods: Hapi, Duamutev, Ensati, and Kabasinov. Number 10. Rumor has it that one pharaoh ruled for 90 years. If the legend is true, then King Pepe II holds the record for the longest reign in ancient Egypt, a whopping 9 decades. He ascended to the throne when he was only 6 years old and lived until the middle or end of his 90s. He ruled Egypt during the 6th dynasty. However, many modern Egyptologists dispute this fact and believe that Pepe II ruled for about 64 years instead. If that's the case, then Pepe II is the second longest reigning pharaoh after Ramses the Great, who ruled for over 66 years during the 19th century. Number 11. Advanced tattoo culture. Tattoos in ancient Egypt were not uncommon, but their culture is often overlooked. Archaeologists discovered tattooed mummies dating back to the 11th dynasty and images of living women with tattoos on their chest, abdomen, and thighs. These marks were believed to be associated with protection and blessings from the gods during pregnancy. Tattoo designs became more detailed and often resembled deities. The process of getting a tattoo is ritualistic, beginning with creating a flat brush, dipping it in charcoal soot or indigo powder, and rubbing it with herbs and oils for healing and fixing. Number 12. Covering Pharaoh's hair. Pharaoh's hair was considered sacred and was never supposed to be seen. Rulers always wore a crown with headgear called the nemes. These specific fashions and expressions separated pharaohs from common people who were not allowed to wear headgear. Number 13. Wearing sandals with the faces of their enemies. King Tut deliberately wore sandals with the faces of his enemies drawn on them to tread on them as he walked. At least 80 pairs of footwear were found in his tomb, and at least one pair had an African captive depicted on the inner sole of one shoe and an Asian captive on the other. These people represented the enemies of King Tut's kingdom. Number 14. Making vowel-free hieroglyphs. Despite having 2,000 letters, the only sounds in hieroglyphs were consonants. They included no vowels. As a result, we'll never be able to determine how the ancient Egyptians pronounced their words. However, some evidence suggests that the hieroglyphic version of the letter E was occasionally present in addition. Hieroglyphic writing is regarded as one of the earliest in human history. Number 15. Egyptians considered the scarab beetle sacred. The family of the scarab beetle currently includes more than 30,000 species of beetles worldwide. They're often called scarabs or scarab beetles, and the ancient Egyptians believed that they had powerful regenerative abilities. It was believed that the small beetle repeated the path of the sun. Just as the sun travels through the sky emitting light and warmth, the scarab beetle rolls its dung, balled with eggs, from east to west until the embryos mature and emerge into the light. The symbol of these insects can be seen in art and jewelry. Stairs are also associated with the gods: Capri, the god of the rising sun; Adam, the god of the setting sun; and Ra, the god personifying the sun. Number 16. Bread and beer have currency. The ancient Egyptians valued beer and bread as currency, with beer and bread playing a central role in offerings to gods and deceased ancestors. Soldiers and workers in pyramids were paid in beer and bread, believing it was a sign of the gods' dissatisfaction with their crop failures. Number 17. Building toilets and tombs. Out of respect for the dead, ancient Egyptians incorporated toilets into the tombs of the deceased. This is explained by their belief that the dead were still alive, but in another world, so necessities such as food, water, bathrooms, etc. were still necessary. Number 18. Constructing fly swatters out of giraffe tails. It's easy to understand this example. Flies were created by ancient Egyptians using giraffe tails. In addition to being useful, they were also seen as being quite stylish. Given that giraffes and many other animals use their tails to keep insects away from their bodies, the functionality of these fly swatters is pretty plausible. Number 19. Keeping unusual pets. We've already talked about how ancient Egyptians loved cats and baboons, but apparently they also kept other animals as pets, including hawks, ibises, long-legged swamp birds, lions, gazelles, and monkeys. Alongside cats, they also had domesticated dogs, which are still common pets to this day, of course. Although in ancient times, dogs were more often used for hunting and guarding assistance. However, to be fair, modern people still use dogs for these purposes. The ancient Egyptian dogs included greyhounds, Seleucus, mastiffs, and dachshunds. Number 20. The belief that the tears of Isis flooded the Nile River. Ancient Egyptians believed that the Nile River flooded every year due to the tears shed by the goddess Isis over her slain husband Osiris. It was believed that she wept as a sign of mourning and in an attempt to piece his body back together. During the flood season, Egyptians celebrated the Night of Tears, floating down the river on colorful boats, praising their gods and offering gifts to the river. In fact, this holiday is still celebrated to this day, but it's more of a tribute to the past and Egyptian culture as a whole. Number 21. The use of loincloths as a kind of defense. According to some historians, the loincloth was employed in ancient Egypt by the populace, particularly males, to stop the transmission of illnesses during sexual intercourse. According to hieroglyphs, men also wore thin clothing to shield their lower parts from the heat and tropical illnesses, as well as to fend off bad spirits. In order to make their clothes more alluring and seductive, it's also thought they dyed them a variety of colors. This behavior is seen as a form of fertility and procreation deity worship. Number 22, wrapping the dead with kilometers of cloth. Mummification, a complex process attributed to South Americans, was invented 2,000 years before the first person was mummified in Egypt. The process involved wrapping the deceased body in cloth, which was over 1.5 kilometers long. In ancient Egypt, not everyone had the opportunity to become a mummy and go to the afterlife, and it was a privilege for wealthy members. The body was placed in a stone sarcophagus, often decorated with carvings, paintings, and special objects. Number 23. Typical incest instances. Cleopatra is a prime illustration of this, after her parents are said to have been siblings, and she herself married both of her brothers at various points in their lives. Despite the fact that these unions did not produce offspring, a pure pedigree was frequently maintained by doing this. It was thought that the earlier described Isis and Osiris were siblings who wed in order to maintain the sway of their family. Many marriages between siblings and brothers and sisters, and even between parents and children, can be seen in the pharaohs' genealogies. Of course, as we're aware today, this frequently results in major developmental flaws in the offspring. For example, King Tut had a congenital leg defect that caused mobility problems and speech impairments due to a cleft palate. Other pharaohs had other developmental abnormalities, such as Frolic syndrome, which was caused by extensive consanguineous breeding in royal families. This tradition continued until the last native Egyptian pharaohs came into power. Number 24. Pharaohs are buried with replicas of their servants. The attendants of the pharaoh were buried with their master in the early days of ancient Egypt. However, hundreds of tiny replicas of the pharaoh's attendants were buried with them throughout time, with the justification that they were intended to perform the tasks the pharaoh did not wish to perform in the afterlife. These figurines, known as ashapi, were interred with them. Since they were also intended to travel with the afterlife, it's fitting that the figurines also seem to be mummified. And number 25, requirements for servants to be covered in honey. King Pepe II, a demanding ruler, hated flies and demanded servants to be covered in honey to distract insects. He also asked Takov to capture a short-strung pygmy for court dancing. However, his contempt for flies did not reflect Egyptian attitudes towards insects, as they were highly respected for their agility and perseverance. Soldiers who showed special heroism in battle were even awarded golden flies. So that's it for the top 25 bizarre things the ancient Egyptians did. I hope you enjoyed learning about some of the most unusual and fascinating practices of this ancient civilization, and thanks for watching.